Hey everybody, welcome to the first of many videos on lists. And lists, they're probably one of the most important things in Python as far as variables go, because a list is what lets you store multiple values inside a single variable. So before I get into kind of too much of the details of what a list is, let's just describe what a list actually is in programming. So a list is also known as an array. And this is in Java, C, C++, and many other languages. You're actually going to see the word array, not the word list. But a list in Python is a little more powerful than an array in these languages. Okay, and now that doesn't mean these languages can't do the same things that a list can do. It's just that lists in Python are much more flexible than many other languages. Okay, so let's take a look at what a list actually is. So let's say that you want to record a whole bunch of ages at school. So you go to the school, you take a survey, and you want to try to find maybe the average age of the people at school. Okay, so you get this long list of ages. So I say ages, and I say 14, 15, 17, 18, 14, 15, 16, 18. Let's do 10 numbers here. And 15. Okay, so you get this list of ages. And you want to be able to store these and do some work with them. Maybe you want to be able to find the average age or the median or mode age. You want to do some mathematical stuff on it. Normally, what you've learned so far is you could just make 10 variables: age 1, age 2, age 3. You could do something like this. But this is honestly going to get really cumbersome when you start worrying about ages of 500 or 1,000 students inside the school. So thankfully, we have a shortcut, and in Python, you can just take all of these and you can put them in these square brackets. These square brackets denote a list, and you just make a list with comma separated, and you can put all of the elements in there. Okay, so now everything's accessible using this variable. Okay, so keep in mind that whenever you make a variable and you use these square brackets on the other side, you're actually going to get a list. And if I were to print this out, type ages, you get a type list. So the class is list. Just like earlier when we did this and you do hi, you get a class string or class float or boolean or integer. Okay, so this is how you create a list. Now, a list is in the computer when the computer looks at it, or when the programming, when Python looks at it, when the program looks at it. What it does is somewhere in your computer memory, your RAM, okay, it's going to store this information. So ages starts at some place, and then what it does is it gives an address to each one of these variables, or each one of these values, I should say, not variables. Each one of these values has its own address in memory. So we're just going to use, since we haven't really learned what addresses are quite yet, I'm just going to explain it as in kind of like a house, like a street. So this is a street, or a neighborhood, or whatever you want to call it, and each building on the street has an address, and each building on the street will have its own address. Could be houses, could be whatever, but every place has its own address. And in list, just like in arrays in other languages, usually you start off with the 0 address, so this is the 0 address, and then in that address, in the house at that address, I put 14, and then 15, and 2, and 17, and 3, oh, it's going to be 18, and so on and so forth. So these are the addresses, and these are the values. Okay, so we have the address, and this is the 0 address, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so you notice, although we have 10 values, we only have, the addresses only go up to 9, but we do still have 10 addresses because we start at 0. And if you remember back to for loops, when I would do the range, I would do stuff like for I in range 0 to 10. Well, this here is 10 values. It doesn't go up to 10, it goes 0 to 9, and then it stops before it gets to 10. So in the same way our address is here, 0 to 9, it's exactly the same. So you have 10 values, and if I use this loop, I could go through all of these values here, and I would know that I'm going through 10 values at that time. Okay, so a list is accessed by the address. So it's easy if you have a regular variable to get the information out. I can just print it. But let's say I wanted to print out this value here. I want to print out 14. So how do I print it out? Well, you're still going to use these square brackets, but you're going to use it in a slightly different way. If there's no equal sign, meaning if I'm not assigning a list to something, these brackets then change into accessing brackets. So this right here, when you're using it with an equal sign, this is telling Python to create the list. But if I were to use it like this with no equal sign, I'm not assigning anything. This doesn't say make an array with one element 4. It says take the name, okay, this is the name, a variable name, and this says access address 4. So if I print this, I get 14. If I want to access address 1, give me 15. Or if I want to access address 9, it'll give me 15 as well. Or 8, 17. Now if I try to access something outside of the address range, I get list index out of range. So if you try to access something that's out of the range of the array, your program will crash. So keep in mind whenever you create a list that if you're trying to access something outside of the address range, you're going to end up getting an error and the program will crash. Okay, so now these here, these addresses, we usually don't call them addresses. What we call them are indexes. So this is an index. I just wanted to use the address analogy. So in this case, we call these indexes or indices. So this is the index of element 1. This is the index of element 2. The element is the value. So we have index, and then these are the elements. So these are other words that you might see. Index could be known as the address of it. Value is known as the element. So if I say access the 6th element, or access the element at the 6th index, let's put it that way, that would be ages 6. So this is the 6th index, or index 6, and the element at that has a value of 16. All right. So these in here can actually be anything you want them to be. So in other languages, when you create a list or array, you usually have to assign certain values, but I can do this. Interestingly, you can change this to say, oh, he's 15 and a half, or true for no reason whatsoever. I can just put true in there. And let me sort these back out, and there we go. Okay, so same indexes. Now I have different types inside one list. So if I were to access element 2, it's going to print out name. And if I access element 7, then it gives me true. And 5 gives me a float value. And I can still actually find the type of each one of these, and it will tell me that they are different things: strings, floats, and booleans. Okay, so I get all those different types down there. So a list can be all the same type, it can be all different types, and it can actually have even list inside of a list. So you can put a list here, and we're going to do some more complicated stuff later on. I'll show you how you make lists with list inside of them and other stuff like that. But for right now, we're going to focus on a list that is just one row of information. That information, though, can be any type of information. It doesn't really matter. Okay. Now, we've learned how to create a list, but there's actually another way you can create a list. you don't have to use these. You still have to use these, but you can put this around it to make it more precise. So there's a list. This right here will change this function, the list function, will change certain information into a list. So we're going to look more later at why you might want to use this. It seems like it's kind of pointless in this situation, and it really is. But in other situations, this list function can be quite helpful. So we'll look at different places later on where we can actually use that. All right, so this video is really just showing you how to create a list. In the next video, what we're going to do is create some lists, and then we're going to manipulate them, meaning we're going to put them together, and I'm going to show you how you can change a list into different things. Okay, so see you in the next video. I'm going to actually leave most of this here for the next video. Probably get rid of this part here, and we'll get rid of this ages, but we're going to keep this list of ages, and we're going to build a new list in just a minute, and we'll play with it a bit more. Okay, so I will see you in the next video, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Thank you.